So many people these days are freaking out about gluten. Should you? Let's explain that. Hey everyone, and welcome to Things Explained. You've probably seen it by now. More and more gluten-free stuff is popping up at stores, and restaurants all over the place are smattering GF all over their menu. People who wouldn't have been worried about it before are now. Do you wonder who really should be worried about it? Celiac disease used to be a disease where little was known and you just had to deal with it. People would go most of their lives with stomach problems, fatigue, or other pain without knowing what was causing it. In this video, I'll explain celiac disease, sharing a little bit about what a leading expert in the field, Dr. Peter Green, along with Rory Jones, a celiac patient and medical writer himself, have said on the topic, in their book, Celiac Disease, A Hidden Epidemic. I'll leave a link in the description. I'll even share some of my intimate personal knowledge about what life with celiac disease is really like. My experience with celiac disease started when I was young. My grandpa was diagnosed before I even remember. I just remember that when he came over for Christmas Eve dinner, my mom made separate food for him. He was a super skinny guy, but he was a tough sucker. I mean, he raised 9 kids, and my dad was one of them. I didn't really appreciate at the time what it was like living with celiac back in the day, and neither did anyone else really. I started having problems with gluten shortly after he passed away. My grandma was able to debrief me in great detail about what to expect, and it was scary. It was like every meal was a ticking time bomb, and you never knew what, or who, would make it explode. 1 out of every 100 people in the United States has celiac disease. 85% are undiagnosed. This means that for every 1 person diagnosed, 6 are undiagnosed. Why do so many people miss it? Well, there's a few reasons Dr. Green lists. IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, is a rather common diagnosis for anyone that experiences digestive problems. A problem with this diagnosis is that there isn't really a whole lot that a doctor can do with it, and oftentimes they just won't go any further. There are some more severe digestive problems, such as Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. It's almost like the old way of thinking was that if it's not Crohn's or UC, and the doctor can't measure anything wrong, it's just IBS and you should stop complaining. Celiacs can look a lot like these misdiagnoses, but the difference is that there's actually a lot that you can do about it. Another common reason for misdiagnosis is what is called silent celiac disease. To explain how that works, let's get into how the digestive system works. The stomach breaks your food down into its basic parts and passes it into the small intestine for absorption. Celiac disease targets the small intestine. The small intestine is packed tightly to fit into your abdomen, but in order to maximize the surface area, and thus the ability to absorb nutrients, it is lined with little bumps called villi. The villi serve as the gate where most of the nutrients of the food you consume enter into the bloodstream. The immune system is constantly patrolling to see what is passing through the intestine, and if it finds something it identifies as harmful, it shuts the gate by causing the villi to swell up. The harmful substance can't get through, but neither can the nutrients. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disease where the body recognizes broken down gluten as a threat and attacks itself to keep the threat out. The problem is that a regular diet consists of a large quantity of gluten, so the body is constantly fighting against itself. The attacks that occur with celiac disease can lead to villus atrophy, or the destruction of the villi. This damage can occur along the entire tract or just a portion. Different parts of the small intestine excel in absorbing different nutrients. When the entire tract is affected, it can lead to a case like my grandpa had, where the body is seriously malnourished and the digestive system is in constant distress. This is classical celiac disease, and until recently it wasn't well understood that in some cases the body only affects part of the intestines. In some people, the iron-absorbing portion of the intestine is affected, leading to anemia, while that person may still get many of the calorie-rich nutrients. This is what is called silent celiac disease. The disease is still hard at work, but because it doesn't produce the telltale digestive issues, patients can go their whole lives with diversionary diagnoses such as anemia, malignancies, osteoporosis, diabetes, and so forth. But these diagnoses are actually just symptoms of the real problem. For every person diagnosed with celiac disease, there are 6 more who are undiagnosed, due heavily to the sneakiness of silent celiac disease. So should you be worried about being one of the undiagnosed? I was a rather sickly child growing up. I knew that my grandpa had celiac, so I mentioned it to my doctor and he ran a blood test. The blood test for celiac measures the antibodies that celiac creates to fight against gluten. The problem with this test is that there are a myriad of reasons why these antibodies can evade the test and show a false negative. My test came back negative, so I didn't give it much thought at the time. A couple years later, things were acting up again, so I went and got a colonoscopy, or an examination of the colon. This procedure generally stops at the small intestine. They saw swelling in the small intestine but didn't go any further. I think that they were mostly concerned looking for UC or Crohn's, and they were relieved that it was only in the small intestine. It didn't really push much farther. They told me that recent research indicated that going gluten-free helped many people with intestinal issues, but that was just one of the several things that they recommended. I basically ended up diagnosing myself later through trial and error of food testing. Now fast forward 5 years. So much more is known about how to properly diagnose celiacs. The problem for me is that our current methods only involve identifying the damage caused by gluten. So in order for me to get a definitive diagnosis, I have to go through what's called a gluten test, which means eating gluten for 2 weeks. Totally not worth it. I mean, there are other non-celiac ways gluten has been found to harm the body. They aren't really well understood, so I'm honestly still not sure which of these things is happening to me, but it really makes no difference to me at this point. If you feel that gluten may be an issue for you, or you've seen some of these related issues, discuss with a doctor before making any drastic changes in your life. If you want to learn more about related conditions, silent manifestations, and genetic trends, check out the link in the description for the full book, so you can get an explanation from the expert himself. So there you have it. What do you think about how your body handles gluten? Leave a comment below. If you learned something, be sure to give this video a like. And if you like what you saw, check out my most recent video here. And if you want to be notified every Thursday when I release a new video, click here to subscribe. And be sure to share with your friends who may be gluten-free, or your friends who make fun of people who are gluten-free.